since we have the good fortune of having the Zero Trust federal sponsor on the call, Dan, any comments on the Zero Trust project?
I would love to tell you that we have an enormous amount of information that has been fed through a hardcore group of dedicated professionals. And it is amazing what I think ACT-IAC has the ability to deliver on. Far and away better than anything I've ever seen so far. And I'm not just trying to blow up the effort. I mean, I'm on several groups and several initiatives here. But what we're doing really has the ability to accelerate the adoption of Zero Trust across the federal sector. And now we're talking about NASCIO and potentially even state and local governments as well. So this is a really great opportunity. I'm very happy to be part of it. And I'm glad that all of us are here. I can't wait for it to come out. Hurry up, Teddy.
Thanks, Dan. And Teddy, I don't know if Darren Death is our program chair, wasn't able to join today. Was he? Did he? I know he provided some updates. Did he provide an update on the contract security project?
So contractor security, we've identified our program manager, our project manager for that on the industry side. I believe we are still working on getting the co-coordinator for the government side on that project at the moment.
And I know the call for volunteers went out some time back. I might just encourage the group to get going, and maybe they can. I would hate to lose volunteer and strike while the iron's hot, as they say.
Right. Nancy, do you know if we've planned out a kickoff meeting for that yet, or is that still to be determined?
No, not yet. It will be very soon. The new project lead, Alka from Perspecta, will get her in contact with Dr. Rodriguez as the government sponsor, and hopefully we can kick it off in early March.
Okay.
Sounds good. Mr. Hernandez, if you can take the next couple. And I heard a rumor that if the Automate FedRAMP project is not done by the end of the next week, that you will buy everybody on the call a free slushie.
Well, there's plenty of snow outside, so I could probably make that work.
That's a slushie.
Yeah, quality notwithstanding.
We're trying to increase the pressure on you, Steve.
Yeah, I see this. No, FedRAMP, the automation project is going well. One of the challenges we have is that our technology vendors and the FedRAMP program itself is evolving so quickly that many of our recommendations have actually been met, and now we have new recommendations. So it's a beautiful position to be in. It does put us in a bit of a race condition, though, because putting out something that's actionable for folks and meaningful is the goal here. So we are going to get it done. We're going to get it wrapped up. But definitely kudos to the FedRAMP team. And I know a lot of the work you're doing there, Doug, intersects nicely with this. But then also kudos to the industry side of this equation, in that as we've been reaching out and engaging with folks, especially on the GRP tools side, we're hearing, OSCAL is in our adoption roadmap. We're getting ready to be able to ingest that and use it, etc. So that piece is looking great. Where we're really honing the language and the tools are around the contracting side, particularly what do agencies need to make sure they're putting in contracts for either their cloud service providers or their GRP tools, to make sure that they're buying something that's going to be ready for the future for OSCAL. And then there's also some data considerations there, because you need to make sure that you can hold the FedRAMP equivalent type data and make sure there's very clear delineation between accessing data through the FedRAMP PMO and what that looks like and the conditions around it, and then what contractually as an agency you should be asking for to make sure that you're not in a situation where, geez, I got to re-download the package every time I want to look at my risk in my enterprise. On the vendor side, we're also making sure that that language is conducive to make sure we give the appropriate heads up. Hey, look, this is what we're advising federal folks to consider putting in their contracts. As a vendor and a provider, here's what you ought to be thinking about in terms of how you can respond to that. And in your roadmap, and you're thinking about how, if you're a CSP, how can you deliver this type of information? Do you want to consider watermarking or something to make sure you have traceability? And then also making sure that you can message and signal that you're ready to do business with this type of machine-to-machine transaction. So it's a fun project. Yes, it's definitely gone on longer than we anticipated, but I think we have some good reasons as to why. We're pretty much in the final phases of that. If people are really passionate or strong, especially in the areas that I just mentioned around the contract requirements or vendor awareness, vendor capability, certainly we'll still have the doors open for folks that want to take a look or engage in that area. If that be the case, feel free to contact myself. I'll put you in touch with our PM and we can make sure that we get you in that process. The second project is around data dominance, and really from a cybersecurity perspective, how do we build in our enterprises and in our services an idea of data dominance? And that means that if there's data out there that exists that leads us to information about risk, we want it accurate, thorough, timely, and if at all possible, in one place for fast correlation and data analytics and hopefully predictive analytics down the road. In my department, we have an enterprise cybersecurity data lake that kind of serves as the primary core of this type of activity. And this project, which is in the forming stage right now, is designed to basically capture the foundations of what we're doing right now in my department, but then also with industry input, look across a broader timescale, 5 years, 10 years, and really strategically put out a roadmap as to how can agencies, departments, or even industry, should they choose, how can they continue to build and grow from this model? When we look at other intersecting projects like Zero Trust, as Teddy just noted, there's a heavy reliance on our ability to both collect, understand, and execute on data in near real time. And if we don't have this piece, the data dominance piece, it becomes very challenging to do so, especially at a centralized enterprise level. So that one, as I noted, we're still in the formulation. I do need to kill off my other project before I start this one. But if you're interested, feel free to drop me a note, and I'll make sure that folks are connected with the dots when we get that kicked off. And then just a little bit of tangential conversation. We do have a new federal CISO, Chris DeRusha. He's joined us. He's co-chairing the CISO Council with me. Been great getting to know Chris, exceptionally bright as we would expect. And the comment about NASCIO and the states and locals is near and dear, because Chris most recently came from just recently had a CISO gig over with the state of Michigan. And so he has seen firsthand both the challenges, the opportunities, and the strengths of what happens at the state, local, federal, tribal, and territorial type of levels. And in just casual conversation, that is an area of interest for him, and how we as the federal enterprise interact with the other levels of government throughout the nation. So lots of fun there. I think he's getting up to speed rapidly. I think he's formulating and honing his vision, and we'll certainly be hearing more from him, and that will obviously probably likely influence a lot of the work we do here. So great news all around. Thanks, Ken.
Actually, I'll leave with you if you don't mind. I know. So one other project that we're talking about, Stephen, do you think it'd be appropriate to share the rough notes? I'll just broadcast them for a bit that Darren had written up from the conversation the two of you had.
Yeah, so we have the SolarWinds bullet there, and we can call it SolarWinds, or frankly, we can just get down into more or less discussion around supply chain. Certainly another hot topic across the federal space and globally writ large. And for us, this project is looking at, there are certain tools, services, and capabilities within our enterprise that we give keys to the kingdom to, right or wrong. And one of the questions that we've been circulating at the leadership level, both at the ACT-IACT forum, but also in the federal space, is especially from a supply chain perspective, what do we need to do here to make sure that we're going to avoid this in the future? And it can't be, well, everything's going to go through this crazy rigorous supply chain process, and we're going to have traceability down to every line of code, et cetera, for everything. That's just impossible to do. But how do we start thinking about the tools, the COTS products that we've deployed, and then how do we start thinking about existing frameworks or existing requirements that can help us, one, identify what are those tools and capabilities where we ought to be providing a little bit more attention, and we ought to be requiring more stringent supply chain controls, and then what do those controls look like? Is it something like Intoto that tracks the development process from conception to operation and disposal? Are there other ways to do it through bug bounties and rigorous pen testing? Lots of ideas there. And on the screen, you can see just some rough ideation of what's come out of a lot of these conversations around what we're looking to do here. So this is very much in a infantile state where we're looking at what's going to be most useful for this particular community of interest to focus on. And I'll say where this intersects with work being done on the federal level is, I'll say right now, without worry, we are asking ourselves the exact same questions that you see on this chart. And I think that this administration, as at least in the public announcements they've made, is very interested in moving rapidly in this space. So Dr. Death and I have been kind of formulating this rapidly. We think we're to the point where we're about ready to put in a formal project for this. The key here is going to be the right scoping. As you can see, this could be quite a large endeavor. And I think that for us, getting it scoped appropriately with the resources that are available is going to be key to moving this ahead. And our first one is, it's kind of necessary. It's that first one. How should we be thinking about the software services and capabilities in the enterprise that would then, ergo, lead to more requirements or more stringent assurance around the supply chain and the pedigree and where that software comes from and how it's developed, or that service or that capability. And so we can expect a lot of intersections with 800-161. Rev 5, obviously, from NIST of 853 has several supply chain considerations as well. We'd be looking at all of these. And then also, like I mentioned before, Intoto and some of these supply chain approaches to say, do we already have the right pieces? And frankly, it's a matter of bringing them together in an execution framework to move forward, or are there things we're missing? Does industry have some great approaches that we're not aware of and we should be taking advantage of? So if you have passion in this space, feel free to ping Dr. Death or myself, and we'll put you on our list of folks for when this comes to fruition as a formal project.
Thanks, Stephen. We share that as a bit of an appetizer to say there's nothing that was very early on, but an idea of what could be covered. Like Stephen said, we're also very much mindful of scope in formulating these projects. You guys are volunteers. We don't want to sign you up for a 1.5-year type proposition. We feel like we can manage a project in about 3-month chunks, and beyond that, it would have to be another phase. So there are different ways to tackle that. But if we figure it's also very timely. It's a hot topic. It's relevant to all of us. So sometimes we're on the hunt for project ideas. Other times, project ideas kind of slap us upside the head. So. This was a bit of a no-brainer in terms of a project prospect. So if you're interested, please take Stephen up on his offer. Let us know, and we will start to formalize here in short order. Just monitoring the participants. Another member of our federal advisory panel joined, Scott Shackelford from Indiana University. So welcome, Scott. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Cunningham to introduce formally our guest speaker.
All right. Hey, thanks, Ken. I know many of you probably saw that Paul from VA was going to speak and thought it was me and then responded like Bo Hauser did. Not again, but I think you're on for a big treat today. For those that read a little bit further and saw it's Mr. Paul Brubaker, the deputy CIO for VA. And I can tell you that if you're not familiar with his name, you're definitely familiar with a lot of his work. He's been a major influencer in the federal space for the last, I would say, decade or so. I'm not going to date him on how old he is, but I tell you, he was a key writer in the drafting of the Cleaner Cohen Act. I'm sure most of you have heard of that one. He's done incredible work at the Department of Energy around hardening those systems with the energy sector and addressing cybersecurity resilience with our energy partners. Currently, most recently, he's been doing digital transformation as well as DevSecOps inside VA. And just recently, he's been promoted to be the acting deputy CIO at VA. So with that, please join me in welcoming Mr. Paul Brubaker, the acting principal deputy assistant secretary for Information and Technology at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Paul, it's all yours.
Thanks, Paul. Hey, and thanks to ACT-IAC. I appreciate the invitation. Yeah, as Paul was alluding to, I've got a long federal career. I think I started back in the Lincoln administration as a GS7 evaluator at the what is now the Government Accountability Office. Back in the old days, we used to call it the General Accounting Office. And since no good deed goes unpunished, I wound up working a bunch of years on Capitol Hill for a guy named Bill Cohen from Maine. Spent time, kind of developing the concepts based on my GAO background that led to the drafting and passage of the Cleaner Cohen Act. Then when Cohen wound up going to the Pentagon, I wound up heading over there with him to be the deputy CIO of the Defense Department, where it was talk about baptism by fire and fire hoses. That was a very exciting time because it was around, Y2K. It was, things were fairly nascent, but we were struggling even back then with the cybersecurity issue. So this is something that is, I've kind of been involved with for I hate to say it, but I'll use the D word, decades. In fact, I was just thinking about this. I think my first presentation to ACT-IAC was actually IAC, when Rob Guerra and Ken Johnson were the industry leaders who were running that back in 1995 to talk about this report that we wrote called Computer Chaos and then the Cleaner Cohen Act. But I'll get out of the hot tub time machine and come to the future here and start talking about, what we're doing today. In particular at the VA, and I know you've heard this message probably from Paul in excruciating detail, but you haven't heard it from me yet. So forgive me if I'm repeating things that you may have already heard, but I think it's important that we just keep reiterating the emphasis that we as a department have on cybersecurity, particularly in this age of IPv6 and the proliferation of sensors and endpoints, and everything's got an addressable space now. So much stuff winds up riding on our network. So we've got to be even more vigilant and practice more intense defense in depth, as we've literally had an explosion of endpoints that really dramatically increase our attack surface. So with that in mind, with the idea too that that's protecting from external, and when you're thinking about the fact that 70% of our threat is internal, we've got our work cut out for us. But thematically speaking, um, you know, the way Paul sort of manages our approach to defense in depth, and the way the department manages it, it's really everybody's responsibility in the department. Not coming as any news to you, but we try to make every employee, not just within OI&T, but every employee of the VA, every contractor that we work with, they're required to go through training. They're required to really kind of understand their role in protecting against phishing attacks and malware, and really try to get them to understand the environment that we're now living in, where you've got a number of end devices ranging from wearable medical devices, employee devices, GFE laptops, phones, iPhones, you name it. It's all right on our network. So it requires us to be doubly vigilant. And because all of these ride on our network, it's really important for us to really understand the health and well-being of our underlying network. Number one, so we're focused on monitoring, of course, but I think if you think in terms of all the medical devices that we now have riding on that network and where they're manufactured, and you start getting into some of the supply chain issues, you kind of understand the complexity of that threat environment, especially when you consider that we've got 170 hospitals out there and over 1,000 clinics that we support, not to mention millions of veterans and hundreds, a dramatic increase in employees and contractors. COVID-19 was also an area where we saw a rapid spike in support to the VA, particularly on the medical side, but we had some dramatic increase in hiring on the benefits side as well. And that just caused us to have to really be a lot more vigilant. So, and as you can imagine, when you've got an influx of 36,000 people in response to COVID, educating them, making them aware of their role in ensuring network defense is a daunting challenge. But we want to make sure that all of our employees, all of our contractors are aware of this level of complexity, what insider threats look like, what a phishing attack looks like, what threats from external actors look like, and we've all got, many of us have a presence on social media, so you can think about who we're linking up in our network, and that's a vulnerability that exists that I'm not sure the average employee is very well aware of, that help increase the effectiveness of phishing. So, and in fact, speaking of phishing, we've and this is one of Paul's genius moves. We incorporated a report phishing button into our toolbar on Outlook for everybody in the organization, and I got to tell you, that's been as simple as that sounds, that's been really effective in us heading off a number of particularly serious potential phishing attacks. So the other thing that I want to highlight for you, and Paul mentioned this in the introduction, is our adoption of DevSecOps. Security is not a bolt-on. It's not an afterthought. It's not secondary to us. When we're developing, when we're engaged in our development efforts, we are laser focused on ensuring that we're building security into our code. And we're also engaged in a dramatic enhancement, modernization of our infrastructure to support 21st century applications, low code, no code environments, taking advantage of platforms and things that are out there that will only serve as we standardize on this and then create security, embed security into our approaches. it will ensure that we've got a much better security posture than we've had in the past. So, like I say, I mean, with the DevSecOps effort, we're embedding security in everything we do, and we're thinking of it in terms of how do we keep that top of mind while we modernize some of our antiquated and complex systems that frankly, as everybody on this phone is well aware of, can represent some security vulnerabilities based on old code and things that we've never that we haven't done a particularly effective job in the past of monitoring. So as we go out and we develop and modernize our network and we replace equipment and we install, we're doing a lot of instrumentation on our infrastructure, again, so that we're really clear that we're really clear on the health and well-being and state of our security posture within the network. You can't manage what you can't see, so it's critically important that we're able to see what's in there. The other thing that we're doing in the DevSecOps environment too is we're boiling the frog, if you will, from a code development perspective. You're going to see a lot more MVPs out there, minimum viable products that we're releasing, and we're going to continue to iterate. So think Netflix, think Apple, think Tesla in terms of the approach that we're taking with DevSecOps, with security top of mind and all of this stuff. And continual releases. So you're seeing the frequency of releases going up. And again, we're shifting to rather than have our own servers and the vulnerabilities those create, we're moving more toward cloud-based environment that supports everything that I just described. So, and just to give you an example of one recent example, and everybody on this phone's aware of SolarWinds. We saw those sunburst and supernova vulnerabilities exploited by the nation's state attackers, and we were no different. I mean, we fell into that whole federal and industry target space, but and this is something that Paul led, frankly, and we're proud of him for doing it. But he led a rapid response that showed really the speed and agility and readiness of our cybersecurity infrastructure, where we shut down all SolarWinds instances within 12 hours of receiving the emergency directive, and it really has had to date zero impact on any VA, protected health information or PII, and it has had minimal mission critical impact. Our business partners, those in the operating administration and staff support offices, there was some, obviously some network monitoring that we weren't able to do. So for a bit, it was like, flying in the clouds a little bit without all of your instruments. But we were able to, tap on the gauges a little bit and do some workarounds to make sure that we didn't have any mission critical impact. Certainly no impact to the COVID-19 response or the vaccination distribution or anything related to telehealth or even EHRM, like the EHRM rollout that we did in Spokane a month ago. And while we've not detected any exfiltration to date, we're monitoring it very, very closely. Our Scrum teams are really working every single day on making sure that we've got a course of action that's going to allow us to eventually reconstitute our SolarWinds instances safely and securely. But issues like SolarWinds is making us acutely aware of our vulnerability if we are relying on one software, one provider, one access point that has vulnerabilities that can potentially become a target for those who want to do us harm. So we're particularly mindful of that. We don't want to become over reliant on any one vendor that's that may have an exploitable vulnerability. And who saw SolarWinds coming? Like, we can think we're safe and secure, but we've got to make sure that we've got diversity in our tech base. And I would just say that we're really getting clarity too on the roles of our employees, and again emphasizing, as I already mentioned, that they, top to bottom, not just employees but our contractor partners, that they are really working diligently to keep the department safe. So that's kind of the high level of where we are. I mean, I can give you some additional detail around the SolarWinds issue if you're interested. But with that, I'd like to open it up to questions and see if we can have a discussion. And if I get any really hard questions, I will turn it over to Paul Cunningham. So, any questions? Comments disguised as questions? Anybody want a list of all the cyber investments that we're going to make in the next year and a half or so? I'm sure that would be great for all the BD guys on the call, having sat on the other side of that table.
And then you're going to say, Paul, give the list.
Right. Yeah, Paul, give him the list. It's all good.
Paul, I've got one. This is Stephen. Given your engagement with Congress in the past, whatnot, if there were a legislative agenda, and obviously we're not going to hold you to this, but if there was a legislative agenda or things that you think Congress should be looking at to help the federal agencies, especially with supply chain and SolarWinds, what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I would caution Congress. I mean, having been a staffer in the past, I would caution them not to get overly prescriptive. We don't need another FISMA-like prescriptive piece of legislation that, while well-meaning, imposes a number of reporting requirements and locks us into approaches that we can comply with but still leak like a sieve. There's a reason why, and this goes back, not that we were particularly clairvoyant or anything, but this goes back in the language that we put into Klinger-Cohen about security. We said, and it's simple, but it kind of gets the point across, is that that security will be adequate. And the reason why we said that is because even back then we were warned by folks in the banking community and financial services who were undergoing a series of early stage attacks, that trying to prescribe a security approach, even back then, the world just moves too quickly. And some of the stuff that I was dealing with on the operational technology side when I was at Energy indicated that, look, you're not going to, if you try to prescribe these fixes, you're going to be behind the curve, and you're going to wind up distracting precious resources on issues that are going to miss the mark. You're going to miss where the puck is going and try to whack it where it was yesterday. And that's a big problem. You can't stay ahead of this. I mean, Moore's law is alive and well. It's actually even more dramatic when you're thinking about things like quantum computing and some of the quantum threats that are going to come over the horizon. So we need to be mindful of this. And it's a thing that I think keeps a lot of us up at night. And as we move toward more wearable devices for our veteran clients, that concerns me, because we want to start leveraging that data. But again, we've got this proliferation, this explosion, if you will, of our attack surface. So it's a concern.
So Paul, it's Alex Lunsford. A kind of a question along those lines. I mean, you're talking about SolarWinds and over-reliance on a single vendor. And, to be honest, the VA's problem is kind of the other side of that. I mean,
Yeah.
you've purchased from 714 different software vendors the last 3 years. You buy from 2,808 different system integrators every year. So, if you're trying to create a safe environment for 157 hospitals, 2,000 community care clinics with over 3,700 different IT contractors a year, how is it going to get safer by relying on more companies? It seems to me that your largest software vendor is less than 7.7%, less than 1% of your spend. You should be spending a lot more money with fewer companies, not with more.
Oh, Alex, I don't disagree with you. I mean, one of the things so my before I started in this acting role, those who know me know I'm a freak about enterprise architecture, but not enterprise architecture like the BS shelfware that winds up getting produced in most cases. I like actionable architectures. And when you got 16,000 items in your reference architecture, that is a problem.
Yes.
We've got too much diversity. I'll foot stomp exactly what you said. We got too much diversity in some places and no diversity in other places, which is ironic given the statistics you cited. Yeah, this is something that's near and dear to me. I want to settle in on what makes the most sense for the organization. But we do peanut butter. You're absolutely right. We spread so much wealth around the community that it is really hard to instill a level of rigor and discipline around and monitoring around contract performance. You're spot on. We'd actually, and not that I'll probably get into trouble with the OSDBU here, but we need to knock this off. It's unmanageable. So your point's well taken.
Paul, this is Chip Block. We do a lot of work on medical devices. You brought it up in your presentation. One of the questions that always comes up is who owns the responsibility of those devices? You work with the CIO. In some places, the CIO does own the responsibility for securing those. In other hospitals, it belongs to the ops side. Have you determined that the IT infrastructure of medical devices falls within the standard CIO structure of the VA?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Anything that winds up touching our network, we become, responsible for it. Now, the IG issued a report last, I guess it was last summer, late last spring, which talked about this very issue, this bizarre distinction we have in our department between IT and non-IT IT. So I go back to my Defense Department days and I think about embedded weapon systems, right? And I think, look, if anything rides on the network, whether it's, the autonomic logistics system of an F-22 or whether it is a laptop, it's gotta be included, accounted for, understood. We've got to have eyes on it from a network monitoring perspective, and it's got to comply with our security policies. So we're stand by, because we're going to be in the midst of. I think there's a general understanding that if it's on our network, we have, I don't want to say control of it, but we've got the ability to affect policy that will determine whether or not that device is on the network or remains on the network. It's particularly scary when you look under the hood on where some of these medical devices get manufactured, and you think about the supply chain issues. It's scary. So stay tuned on that. And Paul, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that subject, but it's something that we're going to be wrestling with, and we're going to be exerting some of our authority. I don't know if folks are aware, but we're standing up, some of the things that have been required under law, regulation, and policy since my days on the Hill around IT investment management, where, if stuff is IT, no matter where the funding comes from, it's got to go through an investment review board and be consistent with our security architecture and policies, among other things. You know, business cases. There's a whole bunch of requirements that are in the checklist. But we're instituting this methodology, and you know, it'll help us get better control over our operating environment. But like I say, the proliferation of these end devices, particularly wearables, which will be the next big wave, is going to create some challenges for us. Hey, Paul, go ahead and add.
Yeah, I think the other cliche I would put in is, we didn't get it here overnight. We're not going to get it out overnight. And if we were starting at fresh greenfield, we wouldn't have designed it this way. But with that said, for decades, it's the way that the buying and the selling. I think I might be dropping here. I might drop my video real quick, but it's the buying and selling, and people, in an effort to get to the end, buy stuff, get it put in, and then we have to spend an inordinate amount of time trying to patch that back into the process. So there's definitely some party fouls on how we do this and where we can find some partnerships to get that done. I mean, I can tell you that there's many vendors that are out there selling, and they don't even realize that they're already in the department. Of course, our department's extremely large, and it's kind of really an odd time when if someone's giving me a business pitch and I got to remind them that they're already here. So it's so that's all I would add.
One quick one for you, Paul. DevSecOps, obviously a big buzzword, kind of the security unicorn, as it were. At least in my anecdotal experience, it's been a tremendous cultural challenge to get folks to start rethinking about how we do security and actually get to a point where they can trust and also recognize that in many ways DevSecOps is a superior approach to security. How are you driving the awareness and the cultural transition at the department?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. That's a great question. It's the hardest thing that we're engaged in right now, I would say. What's the old adage? Culture eats innovation for lunch, right? And there are people, who love waterfall, like love their agile fall development. They're putting lipstick on the pig, if you will, and they need to knock it off. Now, the good news is that about, I don't know, I guess it was 6 months ago or so, we hired Todd Simpson from HHS to come in and lead our DevSecOps transition. And I'll use a technical term. He's badass. He is not screwing around. He's got a lot of people, kind of living in the organization who kind of like things the way they are, who represent a handful of cultural antibodies. Slowly but surely, he's bringing them along. And I think you're going to see some activity here in the next couple of months where he's going to stand up a software factory that is pure, DevSecOps, not screwing around, showing people what good looks like. He's already doing it. I mean, he's already instituting the practices. And I think we're going to wind up experimenting with a handful of deployments that will be kind of rapid fire along the lines of, kind of a Netflix deployment with an MVP and then the iteration on some functionality that is really kind of high value, high vis, is on the new secretary's radar. So I think it's going to be pretty exciting. But stay tuned on that. I don't want to reveal too much because I don't want to alert too many antibodies to change here, because as you know, I mean, there are probably people on this phone call that have support contracts with some of our agile fall practitioners, and so I don't want them to necessarily undo what we're trying to do. No offense, gang.
Well, fair warning to them.
Right on.
The vision is set. The vision is set, right?
The vision is set. The cheese is getting moved. We are, in many cases, I don't know if you guys know Dom Cassatt, but Dom and Paul and myself and Todd, and even our folks in our acquisition support office, strategic sourcing, we're leaning in. Like we're not. There's a transition period here, and we've got a Senate confirmed CIO, so it's going to take a while for us to get a permanent CIO in place. And where Dom and I've sort of, and Paul and LaWanda and Todd and I have, sort of shaken out, is that this represents an opportunity for us to really accelerate innovation and accelerate some of these rigorous and disciplined processes that we're looking to put in place, particularly around DevSecOps and IT investment management. So there's a flurry of activity going on right now. We're not screwing around. We're going to get a lot done so that when whoever comes in as the next CIO will inherit a healthy organization, much better than it was when we got here. Over.
Hey, this is Yasmin with Ambit. Do we have time for one more question? I know we're almost out of time.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Wanted to ask, we're seeing a trend in the healthcare side to refocus on building high reliability organizations, something that of course has been not new at all to the government, very big in the nuclear side on the Navy and some other organizations, but wanted to see where that falls on the spectrum of priorities, especially given the SolarWinds incident and other things for your organization. Is that something that you guys are looking at investing in terms of standing up an office, or is it even at a point of having a discussion right now? Wanted to throw that kind of softball, but kind of somewhat loaded question because it is so in depth in terms of the cultural impact of that, as well as the planning and all the other, facets that go into building kind of that resilient organization.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons. There's a lot going on with VHA, and even across the department in creating a level of agility and focusing on increased reliability. The challenge has been, and I'm just gonna give you kind of the unvarnished point. The challenge has been access to meaningful analysis, meaningful management information that is actionable, and the type of analysis, type of dashboards that inform decision making and allow us to measure and monitor on a continuous basis, outcomes, be it quality of care, be it hiring, be it sensing and responding to changing needs of the organization. Stay tuned because we're laser focused on that, and we've made dramatic progress because of COVID in that arena. So yeah, it's on the agenda. It is a priority. The trick we've also got as a department is that we don't have too many priorities, so everything becomes a priority, therefore nothing's a priority. So we're trying to put a lot of infrastructure in place, capability in place when it comes to data and analytics, so that we can move more toward being what I will call a data-informed environment. I hate the term data-driven because it implies that there is no judgment, and if you're talking to medical providers, it's all about judgment in their mind. So I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thanks.
For the question he has, Paul, thank you very much for the time. I'm going to use chair's prerogative to ask one last question that is only requires a one-word response, which is that a wine ball over your shoulder? The burning question everybody's been wondering the whole time.
It ain't a server rack, I'll tell you that.
There you go. Thank you again very much.
At least I didn't lean over too much, and you guys gotta look at all my bourbon bottles behind me. So.
Paul, thank you again on behalf of the Cyber COI. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Happy Friday, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Have a good weekend. And for everybody, just a quick reminder, the next gathering this week will be March 19th with Katie Arrington speaking. Have a nice weekend. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks all. Take care, Paul.